Why do planes fly across the Atlantic at night? At night, just as office towers go dark and city streets begin to quiet down, one of the busiest invisible highways on the planet starts coming alive. Far above the black Atlantic, hundreds of aircraft slide through the darkness, moving from North America toward Europe like tiny glowing sparks over an ocean no passenger can see. It feels almost backward. Why would airlines send so many planes across one of the world's most important routes after sunset? The answer is not fear, it is not romance, it is a precise collision of clocks, wind, fuel, and history. The story begins long before jet engines screamed across the sky, before glass airport terminals, before crossing the Atlantic became something people did for business meetings, vacations, college, weddings, or family visits. In the earliest days of aviation, the Atlantic was not a route on a screen, it was a wall. Ships had crossed that water for centuries, slowly and steadily, but airplanes were different. They were fragile, short-range machines, often flying beyond the coastline with very little help. Early pilots faced everything at once: violent weather, huge distances, navigation mistakes, unreliable engines, and the deep loneliness of open water. The ocean offered no roads, no fields for emergency landings, no familiar landmarks, and almost no second chances. The first famous Atlantic crossings were closer to acts of courage than ordinary transportation. Pilots pushed through clouds with basic instruments, followed the stars when the sky allowed it, and trusted compasses that could drift, shake, or quietly lead them wrong. Flying at night made everything more dangerous. Darkness erased the horizon. Without that line between sky and sea, a pilot could lose the feeling of level flight, especially inside fog, rain, or storm clouds. Commercial service arrived slowly, almost cautiously. In the 1930s, enormous flying boats began carrying passengers across parts of the Atlantic. These aircraft did not look like the jets we know today. They looked more like ocean liners that had somehow grown wings. They could land on water, stop at remote refueling points, and move with a rhythm that still belonged partly to the age of ships. Their purpose was simple but ambitious: connect continents by air without turning every passenger into a test pilot. In those early years, schedules were not fully controlled by airlines. They were shaped by weather, daylight, tides, fuel limits, and mechanical weakness. The Atlantic decided when aircraft could cross. Airlines simply tried to work around it. As airplanes became stronger and more capable, the Atlantic slowly changed from a barrier into a corridor. Radios improved. Navigation became less uncertain. Engines became more dependable. Airports on both sides of the ocean grew from rough airfields into serious international gateways. Aviation was no longer just trying to prove that an airplane could cross the Atlantic. It was beginning to ask a more practical question: when should that crossing happen? That question changed the entire rhythm of transatlantic travel. During the piston engine era, aircraft such as the Lockheed Constellation and the Douglas DC-4 helped turn long-distance flying into something more regular and organized. They were still slower than jets. They were still loud, still weather-sensitive, still demanding machines to fly. But they offered something earlier aircraft could rarely promise: a dependable schedule. A flight could leave New York in the evening, push into the dark, cross the ocean overnight, and reach Europe the next day. This was more than convenience, it was a powerful selling point. A passenger could finish a workday in America, eat dinner, go to the airport after sunset, board the plane, sleep poorly but briefly in a narrow seat, and then step into London, Paris, or Frankfurt the next morning. The airplane was not simply moving people across distance anymore, it was reshaping the calendar. Time zones made the pattern even more useful. Flying east across the Atlantic means flying toward morning. A plane leaving North America at night is chasing sunrise across the ocean. While passengers sit in dim cabins, the clock jumps forward. Hours disappear. What seems like an odd nighttime departure becomes a practical morning arrival machine. Airlines learned something important. Passengers were not only buying miles, they were buying usable time. Arriving in Europe in the morning meant meetings could happen that same day. Hotels could be reached before evening. Train connections, family pickups, and onward flights could all fit more neatly into the schedule. Night was no longer just a time of day. It became part of the service itself. Then came the jet age, and the Atlantic changed again. In the late 1950s and through the 1960s, aircraft like the Boeing 707 and the Douglas DC-8 made transatlantic flying faster, smoother, and far more common. Suddenly, crossing the ocean was no longer limited to a small number of expensive, glamorous flights. It became a growing river of passengers and cargo. Business travelers, tourists, diplomats, students, families, letters, freight, and mail all began moving between continents in numbers earlier airlines could barely have imagined. But that success created a new problem. The North Atlantic is enormous, and for much of aviation history, radar coverage over the open ocean was limited or unavailable. Over land, controllers could track airplanes on radar screens and guide them through busy airspace. Over the ocean, it was not that simple. Controllers could not watch every aircraft like bright dots moving across a live map. Planes had to be separated by time, altitude, speed, and carefully planned routes. So the sky above the Atlantic had to become organized. Instead of letting every aircraft draw its own path from one continent to another, special oceanic routes were developed and adjusted. These routes became known as North Atlantic tracks, an invisible road system that shifts with weather and traffic. They are not painted across the sky. Passengers cannot see them from the window. But to pilots, dispatchers, and air traffic controllers, they are very real. This is where night becomes even more important. Atlantic traffic begins to behave almost like a tide. In the evening, large numbers of aircraft leave North America for Europe. They fly eastbound through the darkness and arrive in Europe the next morning. Later, during the day, the flow reverses. Aircraft leave Europe westbound and arrive in North America in the afternoon or evening. The system works because it lines up with human schedules, airport demand, aircraft usage, and air traffic control. The ocean becomes less chaotic when most airplanes are moving in the same direction at the same general time. Instead of scattering aircraft randomly over thousands of miles of water, the system groups them into a pattern that can be managed safely and efficiently. Night in this world is not empty at all. Night is organized. Today, when a passenger boards an evening flight from New York, Boston, Toronto, Washington, Chicago, or Montreal to Europe, the timing may feel completely normal. Bags are lifted into overhead bins. Dinner trays arrive. Cabin lights slowly fade. Window shades reveal nothing but darkness outside. Somewhere far below, the Atlantic disappears into blackness. But behind that calm cabin is a massive machine of planning. Airlines choose nighttime eastbound flights because the schedule fits the world on both sides of the ocean. Passengers can leave North America after the workday. They can cross while the cabin is quiet enough to attempt sleep. Then they arrive in Europe in the morning, just as major airports begin opening into their busiest arrival waves, and the day is ready to be used. The aircraft benefits too. A plane that flies east overnight can often be prepared and sent west again later, giving the airline more value from an extremely expensive machine. A jet sitting at the gate may look peaceful, but for an airline it is not simply resting. It is losing productive hours. The more efficiently that aircraft moves through its schedule, the more useful it becomes. Then there is the wind. High above the Atlantic, powerful jet streams often blow from west to east. Eastbound aircraft can ride these tailwinds, cutting flight time and reducing fuel burn. Dispatchers and pilots study these winds carefully. Routes are adjusted to take advantage of helpful air currents or to avoid turbulence that could shake the cabin for hours. A flight may not follow the shortest-looking line on a flat map because the real goal is not to draw a neat line. The real goal is time, safety, fuel, comfort, and separation from other aircraft. That is why Atlantic routes can look curved, shifted, or strangely far north. The airplanes are not wandering. They are following a moving weather pattern, a traffic system, and the round shape of the Earth all at the same time. Night flights also help airports control congestion. Major European hubs want morning arrivals because those flights connect into waves of shorter flights across Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. A passenger flying from New York to Rome, Toronto to Berlin, or Chicago to Vienna may not finish the journey at the first European airport. The overnight Atlantic crossing feeds the next layer of the global network. So the modern transatlantic night flight is not just a red-eye, it is a carefully timed bridge between two business days, designed around passengers, aircraft, airports, winds, and the clock itself. The strangest part is that this nighttime pattern is mostly directional. People often say planes fly across the Atlantic at night, but the more hidden truth is narrower. The biggest night rush is usually eastbound, from North America to Europe. Westbound flights often leave Europe during the day because flying west means pushing against the clock and often against the wind as well. Another surprising detail is that the tracks can change every day. The Atlantic highway used tonight may not be the same highway used tomorrow. Planes fly across the Atlantic at night because the route was shaped by far more than darkness. It was shaped by early navigation limits, post-war airline schedules, jet-age traffic growth, time zones, morning arrivals, airport connections, aircraft economics, and the invisible push of high-altitude winds. What feels like a simple overnight flight is actually one of aviation's most carefully timed routines. When the cabin lights dim over the ocean, the airplane is not merely crossing water. It is entering a moving system built from clocks, weather, traffic, and decades of hard-earned experience.